The autumn wind swept through the Ringstrasse, carrying with it the scent of roasted chestnuts and the distant echo of a street musician's violin. Dr. Heinrich. Adler stood motionless on the marble steps of the Hofburg Palace, his oval gold-rimmed glasses catching the fading afternoon light. His hand trembled slightly as he adjusted his gray pearl-plastron tie, a nervous habit he'd developed during the endless nights spent at his wife's bedside. 6 months. 6 months of experimental treatments, of monitoring her labored breathing through tuberculosis-ravaged lungs, of watching her aristocratic beauty waste away beneath fever-soaked sheets. He'd sacrificed everything, his savings, his practice, even his own health, to procure the experimental serum from Switzerland. The medical community had called it madness. His mentor, Dr. Emil Hartmann, had warned him that some battles couldn't be won with science alone. But he'd won. Isabel von Steinhardt, the Duchess who'd married him in a scandal that rocked Viennese society 8 years ago, had survived. The porcelain-skinned woman who'd defied her family to marry a commoner physician now stood before him, more radiant than ever, her emerald eyes cold as the Danube in winter. "You look well, Isabel," Heinrich said softly, his articulate voice barely audible over the clatter of horse-drawn carriages on the boulevard below. The late October sun cast long shadows across the palace courtyard, where aristocrats gathered for their afternoon promenade. "The color has returned to your cheeks." Isabel adjusted her green emerald silk dress, the structured corset emphasizing her restored figure. A pearl choker covered the subtle scar at the base of her neck, the only remaining evidence of her brush with death. Her honey-blonde hair was arranged in an elaborate Gibson girl coiffure, adorned with fresh roses from the imperial gardens. "Yes, I'm alive, Heinrich. Thanks to your devotion." The word carried no gratitude, only a clinical acknowledgement, as if she were commenting on the weather. She raised her lace-gloved hand to shield her eyes from the sun, her diamond rings catching the light. But survival isn't the same as living. Heinrich felt something tighten in his chest. Around them, members of Vienna's elite began to pause their conversations, sensing drama. Ladies in extravagant feathered hats whispered behind their fans. Gentlemen in tailcoats and top hats slowed their pace, pretending to admire the Baroque fountains while straining to hear. "I don't understand," Heinrich said, though a terrible comprehension was already forming in the pit of his stomach. His slender surgeon's fingers gripped the silver handle of his medical cane. "You saved my body, Heinrich, but you've never made me feel alive." Isabel's voice rose, projecting across the courtyard with the practiced clarity of someone accustomed to commanding attention. "You're brilliant, yes, dedicated, gentle, but I need more than gentle touches and intellectual conversations. I need passion, strength, a man who makes my heart race for reasons that have nothing to do with disease." The whispers around them intensified. Heinrich felt dozens of eyes boring into his back. His face flushed, but he maintained his composure. Years of medical training allowing him to present a calm exterior even as his world crumbled. "Isabel, please. Not here. Let's discuss this at home with the children. The children are why I'm speaking to you here." Her emerald eyes flashed. "In public, where your pride might prevent you from making a scene." Heavy footsteps echoed on the marble stairs behind her. Heinrich looked up to see Captain Maximilian von Kress descending toward them, the afternoon light gleaming off his immaculate military uniform. The captain's ice-blue eyes held contempt as they fixed on Heinrich. His Kaiser Wilhelm mustache was waxed to perfect upturned points, and his hand rested casually on the ornamental saber at his waist. "Adler von Kress said, his voice dripping with disdain. "The little doctor who plays with needles and pills." He came to stand beside Isabel, placing a possessive hand on the small of her back. His physical presence seemed to dwarf Heinrich's slender frame, 6 feet of military muscle and aristocratic arrogance. Heinrich's jaw tightened. "Maximilian. I didn't realize palace guards were allowed to mingle with the Duchess during official events. I'm not a guard, doctor. I'm a cavalry captain. And as of 3 weeks ago, I've been mingling with the Duchess quite intimately." Von Kress's smile was predatory. "You were so busy saving her life you didn't notice who was making her want to live it." The courtyard had gone completely silent. Even the fountains seemed to quiet. Heinrich could feel the weight of judgment pressing down on him from all sides. A elderly countess gasped audibly. A group of young officers smirked behind their hands. "You're my wife," Heinrich said to Isabel, fighting to keep his voice steady. "We have children." "Franz and Sophia need both their parents. They need a strong father figure," Isabel replied coolly. "Someone who can teach Franz to be a man, not a bookish physician who faints at the sight of blood. I'm a surgeon. I've never fainted at blood. But you fainted after 3 days without sleep trying to save me," she countered. Maximilian would never show such weakness. Von Kress laughed, the sound harsh against the elegant architecture surrounding them. "She has a point, Adler. Real men don't collapse from exhaustion. We push through. Heinrich removed his glasses, polishing them with a handkerchief from his vest pocket, a delaying tactic while he gathered his thoughts. Without the lenses, the world blurred into impressionist strokes of color, the gold of the palace, the green of Isabel's dress, the blue of von Kress's uniform. "Where are Franz and Sophia?" he asked quietly, replacing his glasses. Isabel's expression shifted slightly, a flicker of something that might have been guilt. "They're with my cousin at the Prater. They're being cared for. I want to see them. That won't be possible." She straightened her shoulders, her long neck extending with aristocratic hauteur. "I've consulted with my family's attorneys. Given my status in your common origins, I've been advised that the courts will favor my custody claim. The children need to be raised in an environment befitting their noble heritage, not in some middle-class physician's townhouse." The words hit Heinrich like physical blows. He'd known Isabel's family had never fully accepted their marriage, a duchess marrying. A doctor was scandalous enough in 1887, but he'd believed that his devotion, his success, his love for their children, had earned him a place in their world. "You can't take my children," he said, his voice cracking for the first time. "I can and I will." Isabel opened her parasol, the white lace creating a barrier between them. "You'll receive papers from my attorney within the week. Don't try to fight this, Heinrich. You don't have the resources or the connections to win. Be grateful I'm allowing you to remain in Vienna at all. My family wanted you exiled to some provincial hospital in the countryside. Isabel, goodbye, Dr. Adler." She turned away, von Kress's arm encircling her waist. They began to walk toward a waiting carriage, its door emblazoned with the von Steinhardt family crest. The captain looked back over his shoulder, his expression one of triumph. "Try not to cry too publicly, Doctor," von Kress called out. "It's unbecoming." Heinrich stood frozen as they departed, the autumn wind tugging at his coat. Around him, the aristocratic audience began to disperse, their whispers rising like a swarm of wasps. He heard fragments of their conversations. "Always knew that marriage was a mistake, commoner. No matter how educated, Burngro, man, but really, what did he expect, Burngro, Duchess, deserves better than a thin little physician, Burngro." A hand touched his elbow. Heinrich turned to see Dr. Emil Hartmann, his mentor, standing beside him. The elderly physician's gray beard was wind-ruffled, his tweed coat rumpled, his round glasses reflecting concern. "Come, Heinrich," Hartmann said gently. "Let's walk." Heinrich allowed himself to be guided away from the palace, away from the staring eyes and cruel whispers. They walked in silence along the Ringstrasse, past the grand opera house where Isabel had once begged him to take her, past the cafes where they'd shared coffee and dreams of their future together. The gas lamps were beginning to flicker to life as evening approached, their Art Nouveau ironwork casting intricate shadows on the limestone sidewalks. The electric tram rumbled past, a symbol of Vienna's rush toward modernity. But Heinrich felt trapped in the past, in the moment 6 months ago when he'd believed saving Isabel's life would mean everything. "You couldn't have known," Hartmann said finally as they reached Stephansplatz. The Gothic spires of St. Stephen's Cathedral pierced the darkening sky above them. Street vendors were packing up their wares, musicians were playing their evening sets, and the city pulsed with life that felt alien to Heinrich's numb despair. "I should have," Heinrich replied. His voice sounded distant to his own ears. "The signs were there. The way she looked at him when he visited. The way she pushed me away once she started recovering. Love makes us blind to what we don't want to see." Hartmann guided him to a bench near the cathedral steps. The irregular cobblestones beneath their feet had been worn smooth by centuries of faithful pilgrims people, who'd come seeking miracles, just as Heinrich had sought one for his wife. "I gave her everything." Heinrich removed his top hat, running his fingers through his dark hair. "My savings are gone. I took loans I can't repay. I haven't accepted new patients in months. And for what? So she could humiliate me in front of everyone who matters in this city?" "You did what a good man does," Hartmann said firmly. "You fought for the woman you love. That's not weakness, Heinrich. That's the truest strength there is." Von Kress didn't think so. "You saw how he looked at me. Like I'm nothing. Like I'm less than a man because I'm not 6 feet tall with a saber and a military commission. Maximilian von Kress is a peacock in uniform," Hartmann spat. "All display, no substance. He's never saved a life, never eased suffering, never contributed anything to the world beyond looking impressive on a horse." Heinrich laughed bitterly. "But he's the one walking away with my wife, my children." A street preacher had taken up position near the cathedral doors, his voice carrying across the square. "The Lord tests the righteous. Only through trial do we discover our true worth." As passers-by ignored him, rushing home to warm dinners and loving families. "What do I do now?" Heinrich asked, voicing the question that terrified him most. Hartman was quiet for a long moment, watching a young mother guide her children across the square, their hands clutched tight in hers. "You survive, Heinrich. And then, when you're ready, you rebuild. Not for Isabel. Not to prove anything to von Kress or the aristocrats who whispered about you today. You rebuild for yourself. For the man you know you are, regardless of what anyone else believes. And my children? The law may favor nobility, but courts can change their minds. Document everything. Build your practice again. Show that you're stable, successful, devoted. And most importantly, don't give up." Hartman squeezed Heinrich's shoulder. "Franz and Sophia are your blood. That bond doesn't break simply because their mother has lost her way." The cathedral bells tolled 6 o'clock, their deep resonance vibrating through Heinrich's chest. All across Vienna, families were gathering for dinner. In his mind, he saw Franz's serious gray-blue eyes, so like his own, and Sophia's shy smile as she clutched her porcelain doll. Were they asking for him? Did they understand why their father wasn't there? "I need to go home," Heinrich said, standing. His legs felt unsteady, as if he'd been the one ill for 6 months. "I need to ... I don't know what I need." "You need rest. And tomorrow you need to begin again." Hartman stood as well, his cane tapping against the cobblestones. "I have surgeries scheduled next week at the General Hospital. I could use an assistant. The pay isn't much, but it's a start." Heinrich nodded numbly. The two men parted ways at the square, Hartman heading north toward his home in the medical district, Heinrich turning south toward the modest townhouse that suddenly felt cavernous and empty. As he walked through the darkening streets, passing couples arm in arm and children playing their last games before bedtime, Heinrich Adler made a silent promise to himself and to his children. He would not let this destroy him. He would not give Isabel and von Kress the satisfaction of seeing him broken. But tonight, alone in the house where his children's laughter still echoed from empty rooms, he would allow himself to grieve for the life he'd thought he was building, the family he'd believed was his, and the love he'd been foolish enough to think was eternal. The first drops of rain began to fall as he reached his door, autumn giving way to the cold promise of winter ahead. 3 weeks later, Heinrich stood in the Naschmarkt as the November morning sun struggled to break through gray clouds. The outdoor market hummed with energy vendors shouting their wares, the scent of fresh bread mixing with exotic spices from the Ottoman trade routes, flowers blooming in defiant splashes of color against the approaching winter. The Art Nouveau architecture surrounding the market seemed to mock his circumstances, with its optimistic curves and decorative flourishes. He'd come for fresh vegetables. A physician needed to maintain his own health, even when his spirit was broken, but found himself standing motionless before a flower stall, staring at white lilies without really seeing them. "Those are beautiful, aren't they?" a woman's voice said beside him. "Lilies remind me of hope somehow. They grow in the darkest soil and still bloom pure white." Heinrich turned to see a woman in her early 30s, dressed in the simple but respectable clothing of the merchant class. Her brown hair was pinned back practically, and her hazel eyes held kindness rather than the calculated charm he'd grown accustomed to in aristocratic circles. "I'm sorry," Heinrich said, realizing he was blocking her access to the flowers. "I was lost in thought. No need to apologize. I'm Anna Bauer." She selected several stems of lilies with practiced efficiency. "My father owns the bakery 2 stalls down. You're Dr. Adler, aren't you? I've heard about your work at the General Hospital." Heinrich's defenses rose immediately. What had she heard? The gossip about his humiliation. The whispers about how the brilliant doctor couldn't keep his own wife. Anna seemed to read his expression. "I heard you saved a man's life last week. A worker who fell from scaffolding at a construction site. They said no other doctor would have even tried the surgery. But you operated for 9 hours straight and saved his arm." She smiled warmly. "His wife comes to our bakery. She can't stop talking about the thin doctor with kind eyes who gave her husband a second chance." The words caught Heinrich off guard. In the darkness of his personal tragedy, he'd forgotten that his work still mattered, that lives continued beyond the sphere of aristocratic gossip. "I only did what any physician would do," he said quietly. "That's not true, and you know it. Anna paid for her flowers." Then gestured toward a small cafe with outdoor seating at the edge of the market. "Would you like some coffee? You look like you could use something warm." Heinrich hesitated. He'd avoided social interaction since the confrontation at Hofburg, afraid of pity or mockery. But something in Anna's directness, her lack of pretense, made him nod. They sat at a small metal table, the morning chill making the hot coffee steam invitingly. Around them, the market continued its vibrant dance merchants haggling. Children running between stalls, the occasional aristocrat in a fine coat slumming among the common folk for the authentic market experience. I won't pretend I haven't heard the other stories, Anna said, stirring sugar into her coffee. Vienna is a small city when it comes to scandal, especially involving the nobility. But I've never been one to give gossip much credit. People are more than their worst moments, are they? Heinrich wrapped his cold hands around his cup, grateful for the warmth. Sometimes I wonder if I've been naive my entire life, believing in love, in dedication, in the idea that doing the right thing matters. It does matter. Just maybe not in the ways we expect. Anna sipped her coffee, her practical demeanor never wavering. My husband died 2 years ago. Cholera outbreak in the 5th District. For months I thought I'd made a mistake marrying a man who worked in the sewers as an inspector in glamorous, dangerous work, but then I realized he'd saved thousands of lives by ensuring clean water, preventing disease. The whole city benefited from his unglamorous devotion. I'm sorry for your loss, and, sorry for yours. Her eyes met his directly. Though I suspect what you've lost is somehow worse. When someone dies, you can honor their memory. When someone betrays you, you're left questioning everything you thought you knew. Heinrich felt tears prick his eyes, the first he'd allowed since that terrible day. I keep wondering what I did wrong. Was I too gentle, too focused on my work, not passionate enough? Von Kress is everything I'm not. Tall, strong, commanding. Maybe she's right. Maybe I'm not. Stop. Anna's voice was firm. Don't let cruel people redefine who you are. You're a physician who saves lives. You're a father who loves his children. Those are not small things, Dr. Adler. Those are everything. A commotion at the edge of the market drew their attention. A well-dressed couple was creating a scene, a man in military uniform and a woman in an expensive fur-rimmed coat. Even from a distance, Heinrich recognized them. Von Kreis and Isabel. His first instinct was to flee, but Anna placed a hand on his arm. Don't run. You have every right to be here. This is a public market, not their personal palace. Isabel spotted him first. For a moment, something flickered across her face. Surprise? Regret? But it vanished quickly. She whispered to von Kreis, who turned to look at Heinrich with that familiar contemptuous smirk. They approached, von Kreis's military boots clicking against the cobblestones with martial precision. Several market-goers stopped to watch, sensing drama. Adler, von Kreis said, his voice carrying across the immediate area. Slumming in the markets now. I suppose this is more your natural environment than the palace was. Heinrich stood slowly, drawing on years of maintaining composure during difficult medical procedures. I'm shopping for food, Maximilian, a normal human activity. And who is your companion? Isabel's eyes swept over Anna with thinly veiled disdain. Moving on quickly from our marriage, I see. Mrs. Bauer is a merchant's daughter who was kind enough to offer me coffee, Heinrich said evenly. Not that my associations are any of your concern anymore. They're my concern when they reflect on my children's father, Isabel snapped. The November wind caught her honey-blonde hair, which was elaborately styled beneath a feathered hat that probably cost more than most vendors here earned in a month. Our children, Heinrich corrected. Franz and Sophia are mine as much as yours. When will I be allowed to see them? Von Kress stepped forward, using his height to loom over Heinrich. The Duchess's attorney sent you papers. You were granted supervised visits twice monthly. That's generous, considering what? Heinrich's voice remained calm, but something new had entered it, a steel that made von Kress pause. Considering I'm their father. Considering I've never harmed them, neglected them, or done anything except love them completely. What exactly should I be grateful for, Captain? Considering you're a commoner who trapped a duchess into marriage, von Kress snarled. You should be grateful the family didn't have you thrown into the Danube with stones in your pockets. Several market-goers gasped. Anna stood, her practical nature transforming into protective fury. How dare you threaten this man? He's done nothing but save lives while you parade around in your pretty uniform. Who is this woman? Isabel demanded. Heinrich, have you completely abandoned any sense of social propriety? No, Heinrich said quietly, feeling something shift inside him. I've abandoned the illusion that social propriety matters more than human decency. You taught me that lesson, Isabel, though I doubt you meant to. He picked up his market bag, preparing to leave. I'll see my children at the appointed time. If you prevent me from those visits, I'll take legal action regardless of your family's influence. They deserve to know their father, and I won't let your vanity or his. He gestured toward von Kress. Insecurity robbed them of that. Insecurity? Von Kress's face flushed red. You dare. Yes, I dare. Heinrich met the captain's ice-blue eyes without flinching. Because despite everything you've taken from me, you know and I know that Isabel didn't choose you for love. She chose you for spectacle, for the illusion of passion that she thinks she needs. But illusions fade, Captain. And when they do, I hope you're prepared for the reality underneath. He turned to Anna. Thank you for the coffee and the conversation. It reminded me that kindness still exists in this city. As he walked away through the market, his heart pounding but his stride steady, Heinrich heard Isabel call after him. You're embarrassing yourself, Heinrich. He didn't turn around. Behind him, Anna's voice rang out clear and strong. The only people embarrassing themselves are the ones who mistake cruelty for strength. Heinrich allowed himself a small smile as he disappeared into the market crowd, the scent of spices and flowers filling his lungs. It's the ordinary sounds of ordinary life reminding him that the world was larger than Isabel's betrayal, larger than von Kress's contempt, larger than the aristocratic circles that had never truly accepted him anyway. That night in his townhouse study, Heinrich sat at his desk surrounded by medical journals and unpaid bills. The gas lamp cast warm light across his notes about new surgical techniques, letters from patients thanking him for his care, and the legal papers detailing his restricted access to his own children. A knock at the door interrupted his brooding. He opened it to find Dr. Hartman on his doorstep, carrying a bottle of wine and a knowing smile. I heard about your encounter at the Nashmarkt, Hartman said, entering without waiting for invitation. The whole medical quarter is talking about how you faced down von Kress without flinching. Some are even saying you made him look like the fool he is. I didn't do anything special, Heinrich protested. But he felt a warmth spreading through his chest. Pride, maybe, or the simple relief of having stood his ground. You did exactly what you needed to do. Hartman poured 2 glasses of red wine. You stopped letting them define you. That's not nothing, Heinrich. That's revolution in its own quiet way. They sat in companionable silence for a moment, the wine warming them from the inside. I saw Franz and Sophia today, Hartman said carefully, at the Prater. They were with Isabel's cousin, riding the carousel. Heinrich's hand tightened on his glass. How did they look? Like children who miss their father. Franz kept asking when you were coming to visit. Sophia was crying, holding that porcelain doll you gave her last Christmas. The words were knives. But Heinrich forced himself to breathe through the pain. The first supervised visit is in 5 days. At Karlsplatz in the afternoon. Isabel's attorney will be present to ensure I don't corrupt them with my commoner influence. Then you have 5 days to prepare, Hartman said firmly. Not to prove anything to Isabel or her lawyer, but to show your children that you're still their father. Still the man who read them stories and taught them to be curious about the world. Don't let this situation make you bitter, Heinrich. Children can sense bitterness, and it frightens them. Heinrich nodded, staring into his wine. Emil, do you think I'm weak? Be honest. The elderly physician was quiet for a long moment, his gray beard catching the lamplight. I think you're one of the strongest men I know. You've faced death in operating rooms, saved lives others had given up on, and endured personal betrayal that would break lesser men. The aristocrats who whisper about you wouldn't last a day doing what you do. Von Kress has never held a dying man's life in his hands and refused to let go. Isabel has never sacrificed anything for anyone but herself. Then why does it feel like they've won? Because right now they have the spectacle. But spectacle is temporary, Heinrich. Substance endures. Give it time, build your practice again. Be present for your children when the law allows. And most importantly, don't become the bitter, broken man they expect you to be. That would be the only real victory they could claim. As Hartman left an hour later, Heinrich stood at his window overlooking the quiet street. The gas lamps illuminated empty sidewalks, and in the distance, he could hear the faint strains of a waltz drifting from some aristocratic ballroom where Isabel and von Kress were probably dancing, being celebrated, living the life she'd claimed she needed. But here, in this modest townhouse, surrounded by books and medical instruments and the ghosts of his children's laughter, Heinrich Adler made a decision. He would not break. He would not become bitter. He would rebuild, not for revenge or validation, but because that's what physicians did. They healed even when the wound was their own. 5 days later, the November sun broke through clouds as Heinrich waited at Karlsplatz. The elegant square was busy with afternoon strollers admiring the church of St. Charles Borromeo and the Art Nouveau pavilions. Designed by Otto Wagner, formal gardens stretched out in geometric precision, their fountains playing, despite the chill, and classical sculptures stood sentinel over the proceedings of Vienna's elite. Heinrich checked his pocket watch for the 3rd time in as many minutes. He dressed carefully, his best frack coat, a fresh plastron tie, his shoes polished to military shine. Not to impress Isabel or her attorney, but because he wanted Franz and Sophia to see their father looking composed, successful, unbroken. Dr. Adler, the voice was cold, professional. Heinrich turned to see a tall, thin man in a severe black suit approaching. I am Ernst Vogel, attorney for the von Steinhardt family. I'll be supervising your visit today. Where are my children? They'll be brought momentarily. Vogel pulled out a pocket notebook. I must remind you that any attempt to discuss the custody arrangement with the children, any disparaging remarks about their mother or Captain von Kress, or any display of emotional manipulation will result in immediate termination of this visit and potential legal consequences. Heinrich's jaw clenched, but he nodded. The lawyer's implication was clear. He was on trial with his own children. A carriage bearing the von Steinhardt crest pulled up to the square. The door opened and Franz stepped out first, his sailor suit pristine, his dark hair combed neatly. His gray-blue eyes, Heinrich's eyes, swept the square until they found his father. Papa! The cry escaped before Franz could stop himself. He ran toward Heinrich, his 9-year-old legs pumping with desperate speed. Heinrich dropped to one knee, catching his son in his arms, breathing in the scent of soap and boy and everything he'd been missing for 3 agonizing weeks. Franz. Oh, Franz. I missed you, Papa. Mama said you were too busy to see us, but I didn't believe her. I knew you'd come. Sophia emerged from the carriage more hesitantly, her blonde curls tied with lavender ribbons, her porcelain doll clutched tight. At 6 years old, she didn't fully understand what was happening. But she felt the tension, saw the strange man with the notebook watching everything. Sophia, Heinrich called gently, extending his free arm. Come here, my little Liebling. She ran to him then, and Heinrich held both his children, feeling tears sting his eyes but refusing to let them fall. Not here. Not where Vogel could write in his notebook that the father displayed unstable emotions. Can we go to the fountain? Franz asked. Please, Papa. Just like we used to? Heinrich glanced at Vogel, who nodded curtly. They walked together toward one of the Baroque fountains, the children on either side of their father, each holding one of his hands. The simple touch felt like salvation. Are you living in a new house now? Sophia asked, her voice small. Mama said we live in a big mansion with lots of rooms, but I miss our house. I miss my bedroom with the yellow curtains. I still live in our house. Heinrich said carefully, aware of Vogel following at a discreet distance. Your rooms are exactly as you left them. I haven't changed anything. Mama says we can't go back there, Franz said, his jaw set in a way that reminded Heinrich painfully of himself. She says it's not appropriate for children of our station. But I don't care about stations, Papa. I want to come home. Heinrich squeezed his son's hand. Franz, listen to me. Sometimes adults make decisions that children don't understand. Your mother believes she's doing what's best for you. And no matter what happens, you must always respect her. She's still your mother. But you're our father, Sophia said, her green eyes welling with tears. Why can't we be with you? How to explain adult cruelty to children who should never have to understand it? Heinrich knelt again, bringing himself eye level with his daughter. Sometimes, Sophia, people we love disappoint us. They make choices we don't agree with. But that doesn't mean we stop loving them, and it doesn't mean they stop loving us. Your mother loves you very much. And I love you more than anything in this world. More than medicine? Franz asked seriously. More than medicine. More than science. More than my own life. Heinrich touched his son's cheek. You and your sister are my greatest achievements. No surgery I perform, no life I save will ever matter as much as being your father. They spent the next hour by the fountain, talking about school. Franz hated his new tutor. About Sophia's doll, her arm was loose and needed repair, about the trivial, beautiful details of childhood that Heinrich had been starved of. He told them stories about his medical cases, sanitized versions appropriate for young ears, and was rewarded with Franz's fascinated questions and Sophia's delighted giggles. But too soon, Vogel approached with his pocket watch displayed meaningfully. Time, Doctor. Adler already, Franz protested, but we just got here. I'm sorry, children, but I'll see you again in 2 weeks. I promise. Heinrich kissed each of their foreheads, memorizing the feel of them, storing it against the empty weeks ahead. As the carriage prepared to take them away, Franz turned back. Papa? Captain von Kress says you're weak, but I don't think you're weak. I think you're strong in different ways. The important ways. Heinrich felt his composure crack slightly. Thank you, Franz. That means more to me than you can possibly know. When they were gone, Vogel made a few final notes in his book. You conducted yourself appropriately today, Dr. Adler. I'll report as much to the Duchess's legal team. How generous of you, Heinrich said, unable to keep the bitterness from his voice. He walked home slowly through the darkening streets, past the grand buildings that had once represented Vienna's promise to him a city where talent and dedication could overcome the circumstances of birth. Now they seemed like elaborate facades hiding the same old prejudices and cruelties. Back in his study, he found a letter waiting, delivered while he was at Karlsplatz. The return address made his heart skip. The Imperial Medical Society. With trembling hands, he opened it. The letter offered him a position as consulting physician to the society, a prestigious role that would bring not only income but also significant professional recognition. They'd heard of his experimental work saving the Duchess, his successful surgeries at the General Hospital, his innovative techniques. They wanted him to present his findings at their annual conference in December. Heinrich read the letter 3 times, each time with growing disbelief. While his personal life had collapsed, his professional reputation had quietly grown. The medical community, unlike the aristocracy, judged him on substance rather than social standing. A knock at his door interrupted his thoughts. He opened it expecting Dr. Hartmann, but instead found Anna Bauer holding a covered basket. "I hope I'm not intruding," she said. "I brought some bread from the bakery. I thought you might not have eaten properly today." Something in her practical kindness broke through Heinrich's defenses. "Would you like to come in? I was just reading some interesting news, and I find I'd like to share it with someone." She smiled. "I'd like that very much." As they sat in his study, sharing bread and discussing the Imperial Medical Society's offer, Heinrich realized something profound. Rebuilding didn't mean going back to who he'd been before Isabel's betrayal. It meant discovering who he could become after it. And perhaps, just perhaps, there were people in Vienna who would value that person for exactly who he was, not because of titles or social standing, but because of the content of his character and the work of his hands. The December conference arrived with Vienna wrapped in early winter. Snow dusted the rooftops and cobblestones, transforming the city into a postcard of imperial elegance. The Imperial Medical Society's grand hall in the Ringstrasse was packed with physicians from across the Austro-Hungarian Empire, their voices creating a low hum of intellectual discourse beneath the ornate chandeliers. Heinrich stood backstage, his presentation notes clutched in hands that wouldn't stop trembling. Through a gap in the curtain, he could see the audience, hundreds of doctors, professors, researchers. And in the third row, unmistakable in her emerald dress and elaborate coiffure, sat Isabel. Beside her, Captain von Kress looked supremely bored, his military posture suggesting he'd rather be anywhere else. "Why are they here?" Heinrich muttered to Dr. Hartmann, who was adjusting his friend's collar with paternal fussiness. "Because Isabel can't resist spectacle, even when it's not her own," Hartmann replied. "She wants to see if you'll falter. Prove her right about your weakness. Don't give her the satisfaction." The Society's president, a distinguished professor with silver hair, took the podium. "Gentlemen, it is my honor to introduce Dr. Heinrich Adler, whose revolutionary approach to treating advanced tuberculosis has captured the attention of medical communities across Europe. Dr. Adler will present his findings, including the unprecedented survival of a patient given less than a week to live." The audience applauded politely. Heinrich walked to the podium, his legs steadier than he'd expected. As he arranged his notes, he caught Isabel's eye. She was watching him with an expression he couldn't quite read, curiosity mixed with something that might have been nervousness. "Distinguished colleagues," Heinrich began, his articulate voice carrying clearly through the hall. "6 months ago, I was faced with an impossible case. A patient in the final stages of tuberculosis, her lungs severely compromised, her body wasted by fever and infection. Every physician consulted agreed. Death was inevitable. A matter of days at most." He clicked open his medical case, displaying glass slides with tissue samples. "But I propose that impossible is simply a challenge we haven't yet solved. Using a combination of the new tuberculin serum developed by Dr. Koch, aggressive nutritional therapy, and environmental controls, I achieved what the medical establishment deemed unfeasible: complete recovery." As Heinrich spoke, his nervousness evaporated. This was his element, not ballrooms and palace courtyards, but the realm of science and evidence. He detailed his treatment protocols, his monitoring techniques, the complications he'd overcome. The audience leaned forward, captivated. "The patient was my wife," Heinrich said, deciding to address the elephant in the room directly. "Some of you may have heard rumors about my personal circumstances. Let me clarify. The medicine worked, the marriage did not. But those are separate matters, and only one is relevant to this gathering." A ripple of surprised laughter moved through the audience. Even Hartmann looked impressed by Heinrich's boldness. In the third row, Isabel's face had gone pale, while von Kress shifted uncomfortably, clearly unused to being referenced in such a clinically detached manner. "The question before us," Heinrich continued, "is not about personal relationships. but about the expansion of what we believe possible in medicine. If we can save one patient deemed hopeless, how many more might we save by refusing to accept defeat? He presented his data charts showing his patient's recovery trajectory, comparative analyses with other cases, recommendations for replicating his approach. The audience asked sharp, intelligent questions, and Heinrich answered each one with the precision that had made him a respected physician despite his common origins. When he finished, the applause was thunderous. Physicians stood, a sign of genuine respect in the conservative medical community. The society's president shook his hand vigorously, already discussing publication in their journal. As Heinrich descended from the stage, he was immediately surrounded by colleagues wanting to discuss his methods. In the chaos, he lost sight of Isabel and von Kress, but he found he didn't care. For the first time in months, he felt like himself, not a rejected husband or humiliated lover, but a physician who had pushed the boundaries of his field. Remarkable presentation, Dr. Adler. The voice was female, cultured but unfamiliar. Heinrich turned to see a woman in her 50s, elegantly dressed but with an intelligent sharpness in her eyes that reminded him of his best professors. I am Baroness Therese von Wald. I chair the Vienna Medical Charity Foundation. Baroness acknowledged with a slight bow. I'm hosting a fundraiser next week to support a new children's hospital in the working-class districts, she continued. We need medical directors who are both skilled and, forgive my bluntness, not too aristocratically proud to work with poor patients. After hearing your presentation, I believe you might be exactly what we need. Heinrich blinked, processing the unexpected offer. I'm honored, but I should mention that my current social standing is complicated. The Baroness smiled. Dr. Adler, I built my foundation precisely because I find aristocratic pretensions tiresome. I care about competence and compassion, not bloodlines. The question is, do you want to spend your career catering to nobles who demand house calls for imaginary ailments, or would you rather do work that actually matters? The latter, Heinrich said without hesitation. Always the latter. Excellent. My secretary will contact you with details. She handed him an embossed card. And Dr. Adler? Don't let small-minded people make you small. You're better than that. She swept away, leaving Heinrich holding the card and feeling something he hadn't felt in months. Hope. Outside the hall, the December evening had brought fresh snow. Gas lamps cast golden halos in the falling flakes, and the city seemed hushed, as if holding its breath. Heinrich was pulling on his gloves when he heard footsteps behind him. That was quite a performance. Isabel's voice was carefully neutral. She stood alone. Von Kress was nowhere to be seen, wrapped in a fur-rimmed coat that probably cost more than Heinrich's annual income. It wasn't a performance, Isabel. It was science. Heinrich kept his tone polite but distant. Where's your captain? He found the proceedings dull. He's at his club. She stepped closer, and in the lamplight he could see something in her expression he'd never seen before. Uncertainty. Heinrich, I didn't know you were going to mention me. Mention us. I mentioned saving a patient from tuberculosis. That happened to be you. The medicine is reproducible regardless of the patient's identity or their subsequent behavior. She flinched slightly. You've changed. Have I? Or have I simply stopped pretending to be what you wanted me to be? Snowflakes caught in her honey blonde hair, and for a moment she looked like the young woman who'd defied her family to marry him 8 years ago. I heard about your appointment with the Medical Charity Foundation. That's a significant position. It is. Real work, helping people who genuinely need medical care. It suits me. Heinrich adjusted his top hat. Was there something you needed, Isabel? It's late, and I have patients tomorrow. I wanted to say. She paused, struggling with words in a way he'd never seen from her. You did save my life. I never properly thanked you. I didn't do it for thanks. I did it because you were my wife and I loved you. He met her eyes directly. Past tense, Isabel. I loved you. I would have done anything for you. But love requires respect. And you showed me quite clearly what you think of me. I was wrong, she said quietly, the words almost lost in the falling snow. Heinrich felt his heart constrict, old wounds responding to words he desperately wanted to hear weeks ago. But he forced himself to remain calm, analytical. Wrong about what, specifically? About strength. About what makes a man worthy. She looked away, toward the snow-covered street. Maximilian is ... he's everything I thought I wanted. Commanding, passionate, impressive. But he's also cruel in the small ways I didn't notice before. He mocks my interests. He makes decisions without consulting me. And he has no patience with the children. He sees Franz's thoughtfulness as weakness. Sophia's sensitivity is a flaw to be corrected. I see. Heinrich kept his voice neutral, though part of him felt a bitter satisfaction. And you're telling me this because? Because I made a terrible mistake. Isabel turned back to him, and he saw tears glistening in her emerald eyes. Because I threw away something real for something that merely looked impressive. Because I want no. The word came out harder than he'd intended. Whatever you're about to ask, the answer is no. Heinrich, please, you humiliated me, Isabel. In public, in front of everyone who matters in Viennese society. You took my children and had your attorney treat me like a criminal for wanting to see them. You chose a man who embodied everything I'm not, specifically to show me how inadequate you found me. His voice remained steady, but intensity burned beneath it. And now that your impressive captain is showing his true colors, you want what? Forgiveness? Reconciliation? Another chance to destroy what little I've rebuilt? I want my husband back, she whispered. Your husband is dead, Heinrich said flatly. The man who would have forgiven anything, sacrificed everything. Believed your love was worth any price. That man died on the steps of Hofburg when you told him he wasn't man enough for you. I'm what's left, and I'm not available for your convenience. What about the children? They need both their parents. The children need parents who respect each other. We can never be that again. He stepped back, creating physical distance. But I will continue to see Franz and Sophia according to our arrangement. I will be civil to you for their sake. And I will never, ever forgive you for making them weapons in your selfish games. Isabel's face crumpled. I'm sorry, Heinrich. I'm truly sorry. Perhaps you are. But sorry doesn't undo what you've done. He tipped his hat in a gesture of cold courtesy. Good night, Isabel. Give my love to our children. Tell them I'll see them next week at Karlsplatz, as scheduled. He walked away through the falling snow, leaving her standing alone under the gas lamp. With each step, he felt lighter, as if finally releasing a burden he'd been carrying. She'd given him the apology he'd once desperately craved, and he'd found it meant nothing. The power she'd held over him was gone. The snow crunched beneath his boots as he made his way through the quiet streets. Vienna's grand architecture seemed less imposing now, merely beautiful, part of a city he was learning to navigate on his own terms rather than through the lens of Isabel's aristocratic world. When he reached his townhouse, he found Anna Bauer sitting on his front steps, seemingly unbothered by the cold. She stood when she saw him, brushing snow from her practical wool coat. Anna, what are you doing here? I heard about your presentation, she said with a smile. The Bakers Guild has connections everywhere. Word is you were brilliant. I wanted to congratulate you properly. Heinrich felt warmth spread through his chest. Would you like to come in? I could make tea. I'd like that very much. Inside, as Heinrich prepared tea in his modest kitchen while Anna examined his books with genuine interest, he realized something profound. The life he was building now with meaningful work, honest friendships, and the respect of people who valued substance over spectacle was better than the life he'd lost. You seem different tonight, Anna observed, accepting a cup of tea. Lighter somehow. I faced my past and discovered it no longer has power over me, Heinrich said simply. Isabel apologized. She said she made a mistake. And what did you say? I said no. I said the person she wants no longer exists, and the person I'm becoming isn't available. Anna studied him over the rim of her teacup, her hazel eyes thoughtful. That took courage, or perhaps just clarity. For months, I believed her rejection meant I was inadequate. But tonight, presenting my work to peers who judged me on merit rather than bloodline, I remembered who I actually am. Not the man Isabel wanted me to be, but the physician I've always been. And that man is enough. More than enough, Anna said softly. They talked late into the night, the conversation flowing easily from medicine to philosophy to the small details of daily life. When Anna finally left, promising to bring fresh strudel the next day, Heinrich stood at his window watching the snow fall on Vienna. In 2 weeks he would see Franz and Sophia again. In January he would begin his new position with the Medical Charity Foundation. His career was ascending just as his marriage had collapsed, as if the universe had decided he could have one or the other but not both. But standing there in his quiet townhouse, surrounded by books and medical journals rather than aristocratic finery, Heinrich Adler discovered he was content with that trade. Let Isabel have her mansions and her captain. He had work that mattered, children who loved him, and friends who saw his worth. And perhaps someday he might have something more, something built on respect and genuine affection rather than social climbing and desperate passion. The possibility hung in the air like the snow outside, promising and pure and full of potential. The gas lamp on his desk flickered, casting dancing shadows on the walls. Heinrich picked up his pen and began drafting his paper for the Medical Society's journal, his handwriting precise and confident. The Duchess's physician had died with the marriage, but Dr. Heinrich Adler, The man who refused to accept impossible diagnoses and impossible odds was very much alive. And in the end, that man was worth infinitely more than any title, any social standing, any shallow definition of strength that measured a man by his height and his sword rather than by his mind and his heart. Vienna's snow fell softly through the night, covering old wounds with new possibilities, and Heinrich rode on, building his future one careful word at a time. Spring arrived in Vienna with an explosion of color that seemed almost defiant after the long winter. The Prater's chestnut trees bloomed in magnificent whites and pinks, their branches heavy with blossoms that scattered like confetti in the April breeze. Heinrich walked through the park on a Saturday morning, the massive Riesenrad Ferris wheel rotating slowly against a crystalline blue sky, children's laughter mixing with the calls of vendors selling roasted almonds and sweet pastries. He wasn't alone. Franz walked beside him, the boy's hand tucked securely in his father's, while Sophia skipped ahead, her lavender dress fluttering as she chased a butterfly through the formal gardens. The supervised visits had ended 2 months ago, a development that had surprised everyone, Heinrich most of all. "Papa, look," Sophia called, pointing to a puppet show stage where Kasperl, the traditional Austrian puppet character, was engaged in comic battle with a crocodile. "Can we watch?" "Of course, Liebling." Heinrich guided them to a bench near the performance, settling between his children as they became absorbed in the slapstick humor. He marveled at how natural this felt now, how the awkwardness of those first supervised meetings had gradually dissolved into genuine connection. The change had begun in February when Franz had fallen seriously ill with pneumonia. Isabel's personal physician, an elderly aristocrat more concerned with protocol than medicine, had prescribed bed rest and prayer. But Sophia, terrified for her brother, had somehow gotten word to Anna at the bakery, and Anna had immediately found Heinrich at the children's hospital. Heinrich had arrived at the von Steinhardt mansion to find Isabel frantic, von Kress uselessly pacing, and Franz struggling to breathe, his lips tinged blue. Without asking permission, Heinrich had taken charge, clearing the stuffy sick room, administering modern treatments, staying awake for 3 days straight monitoring his son's condition. Franz had recovered, and Isabel, watching Heinrich work with a dedication that had nothing to do with impressing her and everything to do with saving their child, had seen something she'd apparently forgotten. Her ex-husband was extraordinary at what he did. The custody arrangement had been quietly modified after that. No more supervised visits, no more restrictions. Isabel's attorney had delivered the paperwork with tight-lipped disapproval, but the Duchess had overruled her family's objections. Whatever her flaws, she loved her children, and she'd finally recognized that keeping them from their father served no one. The puppet show ended with Kasperl triumphant, and the children applauded enthusiastically. As they wandered toward the popular section of the Prater, where working-class families mingled freely with the occasional adventurous aristocrat, Franz tugged on Heinrich's sleeve. "Papa, I need to tell you something." The 9-year-old's face was serious, his gray-blue eyes troubled. Captain von Kreis asked Mama to marry him. Heinrich felt his stomach drop, but he kept his expression carefully neutral. "I see. And what did your mother say?" "She said she needs time to think about it." Franz kicked at a loose stone on the path. I don't want her to say yes, he's not kind like you are. He gets angry when Sophia cries, and he says I read too much. He wants to send me to military academy when I turn 10. Military academy can be a good education for some boys, Heinrich said carefully, though the thought of his gentle, intellectual son in such an environment made him ache. "But not for me," Franz said with conviction. "I want to be a doctor, like you. I want to help people, not march in parades and shoot guns." Sophia had stopped chasing butterflies and come back to join them, sensing the serious tone. "I don't like the captain either," she announced with 6-year-old bluntness. "He never smiles, and he told me I'm too old to carry my doll. But Annabelle isn't just a doll, she's my friend." Heinrich knelt down, bringing himself eye-level with both children. The spring sun was warm on his back, and nearby a street violinist began playing a Strauss waltz. "Listen to me. Both of you. Your mother's choices about her future are hers to make. We can't control what she decides. But I promise you this, no matter what happens, I will always be your father. I will always be here for you. And I will fight for you if I must." "Even against a soldier?" Sophia asked, her green eyes wide. "Especially against a soldier," Heinrich said with a small smile. "Because the most important battles aren't fought with swords and guns. They're fought with persistence, with truth, and with love that doesn't give up." They continued their walk, eventually stopping at a small cafe with outdoor seating where Heinrich bought them each a slice of Sachertorte and hot chocolate. As they ate, Franz asked endless questions about medicine. How did the heart pump blood? Why did fevers happen? What made bones break? And Heinrich answered each one thoughtfully, watching his son's face light up with the same intellectual curiosity that had driven Heinrich's own career. This, he thought, was what mattered. Not the drama with Isabel, not the social humiliation, not even the professional success. These moments with his children, helping them understand the world, watching them grow into themselves, this was the only victory that truly counted. As afternoon shadows began to lengthen, a carriage pulled up near the cafe. Isabel emerged, alone. She wore a simple day dress in pale blue, far less elaborate than her usual attire, and her honey-blonde hair was arranged more practically than fashionably. She looked tired, but somehow more real than Heinrich had seen her in years. "Children, your mother is here," Heinrich said unnecessarily, as both Franz and Sophia had already spotted her. They ran to her, and she embraced them with genuine warmth. Then she approached Heinrich, her expression uncertain. "They seem happy," she observed, watching Franz animatedly describe the puppet show to her. "They are. Fresh air and chocolate cake tend to have that effect." Heinrich stood, preparing to take his leave. Their interactions had become politely distant since his rejection of her apologies, civil for the children's sake, but nothing more. "Heinrich, wait." Isabel caught his sleeve lightly. "I need to speak with you about Maximilian's proposal." "That's none of my business, Isabel." "It is, actually, because it affects our children." She glanced at Franz and Sophia, who were now examining a flower vendor's display. "He wants me to severely limit your time with them once we're married. He says it's confusing for children to have such close contact with a former spouse. He wants to establish himself as the primary male authority in their lives." Heinrich felt cold anger crystallize in his chest. "And you're telling me this because I'm not going to marry him?" The words came out in a rush. "I was considering it, the social advantages, the security, the image of it all. But then I watched you with Franz when he was ill. I saw the way you dropped everything, how you fought for his life with the same dedication you once fought for mine. And I realized something." She met his eyes directly, and he saw genuine regret there. "Maximilian would never do that. He talks about strength and masculinity, but when real crisis comes, he retreats to his club and waits for someone else to solve the problem. You're the one who shows up. You're the one who fights. And Franz is right, you're strong in the ways that actually matter." Heinrich was quiet for a long moment, processing this. "I'm glad you've reached that conclusion, Isabel, truly. But if you're hoping this changes things between us, I'm not," she interrupted. "I know I destroyed what we had. I know you've moved on, and you should. Anna Bauer is a good woman. She looks at you the way I should have looked at you, like you're remarkable exactly as you are." Heinrich blinked in surprise. "How do you know about Anna?" "Vienna is small, Heinrich. People talk. They say the baker's daughter visits the doctor's house several evenings a week. They say she was seen at your presentation, beaming with pride. They say," Isabel smiled slightly, "that she makes you laugh. Something I rarely manage to do." "We're friends," Heinrich said, though even he could hear the uncertainty in his voice. Were they just friends? Anna's presence had become essential to his life, her practical wisdom, her easy humor, quote, the way she challenged his tendency toward melancholy with her pragmatic optimism. "Perhaps for now," Isabel said knowingly, "but I've learned something these past months. Real love isn't dramatic passion that burns bright and fast. It's quiet support that builds slowly and lasts. You deserve that, Heinrich. And I'm genuinely sorry I couldn't be the one to give it to you." Before Heinrich could respond, Sophia came running back, her hands full of daisies the vendor had given her. "Mama! Papa! Look what the nice lady gave me. Can we make flower crowns like we used to?" "Of course, darling," Isabel said, her voice thick with emotion. She looked at Heinrich. Would you stay? Just for a little while longer? The children love it when we're all together, and it happens so rarely now." Heinrich hesitated, old wounds warring with his desire to give his children normalcy. But then he saw Franz watching hopefully, and Sophia already weaving daisies together with determined concentration, and he nodded. They spent the next hour in the spring sunshine, helping Sophia make flower crowns while Franz read aloud from a medical text. Heinrich had brought him a simplified anatomy book that the boy treasured. Isabel laughed at something Sophia said, a genuine laugh free of performance. And for a moment Heinrich glimpsed the young woman who'd once defied her family for love, before that love had been corrupted by her need for validation and status. But he felt nothing romantic stirring in his chest. That part of his heart where Isabel had lived was healed now, scarred over, closed, and surprisingly he found peace in that. Some loves ended, and that ending made space for new beginnings. As twilight painted the Prater in shades of gold and purple, they walked the children back to Isabel's carriage. Von Kress was waiting there, his posture rigid with barely contained anger. He'd clearly heard about his rejected proposal. Adler, he spat the name like a curse. Convenient how you're always around, isn't it? Worming your way back into a family that's moved beyond you. Maximilian, that's enough, Isabel said sharply. Dr. Adler is the father of my children. He has every right to be here. You're making a mistake, Isabel. Choosing weakness over strength, mediocrity over excellence. No, Franz said suddenly, his young voice cutting through the captain's tirade. The boy stepped forward, positioning himself between Von Kress and his father. You're wrong about my papa. He's not weak. He saved my life when I was dying. He saved Mama's life when all the fancy doctors said it was impossible. You just wear a uniform and act important, but he actually does important things. The Prater seemed to hold its breath. Von Kress's face flushed red with humiliation, being lectured by a 9-year-old. In public was perhaps the ultimate insult to his military pride. You insolent little. He raised his hand, and for a terrible moment Heinrich thought the captain might actually strike his son. Heinrich moved with a surgeon's speed, catching Von Kress's wrist mid-motion. Don't. The word was quiet but carried absolute authority. Don't even think about touching my child. They stood frozen in tableau, Heinrich gripping the captain's wrist. Von Kress trembling with rage, Franz protected behind his father's slender frame. Isabel pale with shock, and Sophia clutching her flower crown with frightened eyes. You dare put your hands on me? Von Kress snarled. I dare protect my son from a man who thinks violence is an appropriate response to honest observation. Heinrich released the captain's wrist but didn't step back. Franz is right. You perform strength without possessing it. You demand respect without earning it. And now you've shown everyone here exactly what kind of man you are. Several passers-by had stopped to watch, drawn by the confrontation. Among them, Heinrich noticed, were 2 officers from Von Kress's own regiment, their expressions uncomfortable as they witnessed their captain's loss of control. Von Kress seemed to realize the same thing. With visible effort, he composed himself, straightening his uniform. This isn't over, Adler. Yes, it is, Isabel said firmly, moving to stand beside Heinrich not romantically, but in united parental front. Maximilian, I'm ending our relationship. I won't have a man in my life, or in my children's lives, who threatens them. Please leave. Isabel, now, please. The captain looked between them, seeing his defeat written clearly. With a final venomous glare at Heinrich, he turned and strode away, his military bearing unable to disguise the humiliation of public rejection. When he was gone, Isabel sagged slightly. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry I ever brought him into our children's lives. You're protecting them now, Heinrich said gently. That's what matters. Franz tugged on Heinrich's coat. Papa, was I wrong to say what I said? Did I cause trouble? Heinrich knelt down, pulling his son into a tight embrace. You spoke the truth, Franz. Bravely and clearly. I'm proud of you. Never apologize for defending what matters. Sophia joined the embrace. And then, hesitantly, Isabel wrapped her arms around all 3 of them, not as lovers reuniting, but as parents united in love for their children. As they finally separated and said their goodbyes, with plans for Heinrich to collect the children next Saturday for a full day together, Heinrich felt something settle in his chest. Closure. Not the bitter kind that comes from resentment, but the peaceful kind that comes from truly moving forward. He walked home through the spring evening, the scent of blooming lilacs heavy in the air. At his doorstep, he found Anna waiting with a basket of fresh bread and her characteristic patient smile. I heard there was excitement at the Prater, she said. Quote, Baker's Guild hears everything, remember? Seems my life is permanently subject to Vienna's gossip network, Heinrich said wryly, unlocking his door. Come in. I'll make us tea, and you can tell me what fantastical version is already circulating. As they settled into the familiar, comfortable rhythm of their evening conversations, Heinrich realized that this quiet, honest companionship was what he'd been unconsciously building toward. Not dramatic passion or social advancement, but genuine connection with someone who saw him clearly and chose his company anyway. Anna, he said suddenly, interrupting her story about a particularly demanding customer at the bakery, would you accompany me to the Medical Society's spring gala next month? As my guest, not just as a friend. She set down her teacup carefully, her hazel eyes searching his face. Heinrich, are you certain? Your colleagues, the social implications? I'm absolutely certain. I'm done living my life according to other people's expectations or trying to fit into worlds that don't want me. You make me laugh. You make me think. You make me want to come home at the end of difficult days. That's worth infinitely more than any social advantage. Anna's smile transformed her face. Then yes, I would be honored. Outside, Vienna's spring night settled over the city like a blessing. Somewhere across town, Isabel was explaining to her children why the captain wouldn't be visiting anymore. Somewhere von Kress was drinking away his humiliation. Somewhere the aristocratic gossips were already composing tomorrow's whispered scandals. But here, in this modest townhouse filled with medical texts and the lingering scent of fresh bread, Dr. Heinrich Adler had found something those people would never understand: the quiet triumph of being exactly who you are, with exactly the right person to appreciate it. And as spring gave way to summer and summer to autumn, and another year turned on Vienna's ancient streets, Heinrich built a life of substance rather than spectacle, saving lives at the children's hospital, publishing papers that advanced his field, raising his children with honesty and love, and slowly, carefully, allowing Anna Bauer to teach him that not all love ended in betrayal. The Duchess had wanted a real man. She'd just never understood what that actually meant: not performance or posturing, but persistence, integrity, and the courage to be vulnerable enough to love again after being broken. Heinrich had become that man, not despite his trials, but because of them.